Hey, welcome everybody. It's yet another episode of Bedard's Unofficial Podcast. And today I'm sitting with Stephen Riley, the author of the new book, God's Paddlers, Canada's Most Dangerous School, The Inside Story. And today we're going to talk about the book and get some of his views on it. Welcome, Stephen.
Yeah, hi. Good to be here.
And where are you sitting right now?
I'm sitting up in my little office in outside the tiny village of Temple Patrick, where well, because of the difference in time, it's a little dark here now. The snow from the last 3 days has gone away, and I'm feeling good.
Beautiful. I'm sitting in California. Sun is shining. It's cold as hell. Well, cold as hell for here. And we've never met, have we?
Never, never, though I know your reputation.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
We have been working together for a bit, and I was proud to help out on God's Paddlers. It was a lot of fun, and now the book's out. It's selling. Some people like it, some people don't. But that's okay. I view it personally as more of a history book that really tells the history of St. John's from the onset all the way to the end, with a lot of stuff in the middle. 450 pages of it.
Yeah, it's history to the extent that a lot of it's history that hasn't been heard before because I had access to people and a lot of documentation that your average, in fact, I don't think very many students, former students, had access to to that material at all, at all. Internal memos and reports and minutes of meetings that were closed to the students, of course, and to their parents. So there's it's a yeah, it was the secret history, a lot of it. Yeah.
Well, secret, yes, it was. I mean, the having I want to, I used to say I attended the school and graduated, and then sometimes I say I survived the school, depending on how I feel that particular day. But it definitely brought forth a lot of things that I personally didn't know at all.
Or it gives context to stuff that you did know, you know.
Yes, yes. Well,
So
whereas in Richard D. Candole's book, I realized there were things that we as students live through every year. For instance, the first SWATs on your first night in school. And it a lot of people read that and said, "Huh, I wasn't that special."
Mm.
A lot of the
that's right.
boys before me went through this.
Sure, put yourself back into that time space where you were only whatever, 14, 15 years old or even younger for some of the students. And the first time their feelings that they felt when some guy said, okay, all eight of you then in that group that were there at the time, up here right now. All
Oh,
right. And it's going to be, five swats each. Okay. That's the very first time it happened. A 14-year-old thinking, what the hell's going on here? Because that's what they told me, the guys who had done that. And then put yourself into a position where if you had known, if you had known that collectively in a single year, there would have been 800 SWATs delivered to the butts of however many boys in the space of that year. And it's exceptional that an outfit should be doing that kind of thing.
well, at the time I went, they didn't record it. None of it was recorded. And later on, I believe in Alberta, they started, keeping a book of SWATs or treating
Yeah.
it
And you
as
know why
a,
they kept a book of SWATs? Because they were scared. They'd had enough people complain. They had one case that was investigated by Alberta Social Services, right? That got to court. And there was, what's that expression that they used to use in court? There was no judgment on it. It wasn't guilty. I wasn't not guilty. They
yep.
were scared. That's why they started counting. But the boys had been counting before. I don't know what experience you had at that, Pierre, but a lot of the boys would mark that stuff down at the back of their Hilroy notebooks or on
Oh,
their
there were,
sneakers.
I apologize. I've got the sun in my face right now, but I picked the wrong spot to podcast from, but that's okay. You guys can deal with it. Um, the first thing that happened was the first night there. Everybody's in the dorms. They call lights out. And somebody talks,
Hmm.
and the master comes out and
Hmm.
says, "All right, who's
Hmm.
talking?" Nobody fesses up. Everybody out of bed for a
Hmm.
SWAT. That
Standard.
happened pretty much every year. Um, that was a universal
But you wouldn't
experience.
know that. You wouldn't know that.
You
How
wouldn't
the
know
hell
that.
would you have known that? You said pretty universal. You're just projecting it. You
No,
didn't
no, I
know
read
that.
about it.
What I can tell you exactly, you read about it because I delivered it in the book. I had
Hmm.
spoken to dozens and dozens of former students, and they're telling me stuff that they were telling for the first time, known only to them, to the boys in their class, and the ones who delivered the SWATs. But they
Yep.
didn't know what happened in the following year, or years, or in the other school in Alberta, or the one in Ontario or Manitoba.
Well, let's talk about that. You bring up a really good point. There were three different schools, and there was a vibe. Reading the book, there was a vibe to each school. Can you talk about that a little?
To some extent, I can. And again, I'm going to try to do this very briefly if I can. Different times, different places, and different amounts of independence for each school. In the initial years where there were three schools that were acting collectively according to general policies and practices, right? That was fine. But after a particular event happened in Ontario involving a cult kind of a school that 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 the teachers from all three schools, or a lot of them, attended. After that, they realized, wait a second, we're not doing what they were doing. Why should we? We've got more input from the parents here than they have over in Alberta. In Ontario, they had more of that input. Stuff they were doing in Manitoba that they weren't doing in the other two schools, right? And as time went on, from about 1979 onwards, that split became gradually more and more and more pronounced. So that by, let's say, 1988 or 89 in there, there was a lot of dissimilarity, right? They were going their own way in certain respects, even in terms of relations with the Anglican Church, or lack of them.
I agreed. And, Ontario was more of a parent participation.
Hmm.
Uh, Manitoba was more of the old school,
Hmm.
literally, right? Old school
Hmm.
type of
Yep. Yeah.
attitude. And Alberta, I'll just say, Alberta was a functioning school.
Yep. I tend to agree in the broadest of terms, okay? But when you get into particular areas,
Exactly.
you find out that they could beat your arse just as hard as they could in Ontario or Manitoba. But they were doing
Well,
things differently. They were looking ahead a bit too. And because of that social services case in Alberta, they were starting to say, uh, let's have a look at some of this stuff. Yeah, why don't we keep a SWAT book? If these guys come after us again, we can say, hey, you know, look at this is what we do. We're conscientious about the discipline. But it wasn't just that, it was curriculum as well. It was practices in the outdoor programs. It was the whole shitaroo, you know?
it is. Though, what did you just say? Shitaroo?
No.
Oh, okay. Just thought I'd ask. Nice, nice word. A lot of people thought going when Alberta really took off, I guess, after the other schools closed, I think. That's a sense I got from the book. Manitoba and, I mean, the end of Manitoba was just horrific. I think you
Hmm.
detailed that well. And you were there, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you produced The Old
Hmm.
Boys, which I got to tell you,
Hmm.
I mean, that was my idea. You stole my idea to do a new boy a new boy retrospective. I've always wanted to like look at all the people who were on the New Boy. There's a few of us still alive, right? The
Hmm.
famous, infamous National Film Board thing. But you
Hmm.
actually did it. Can
Hmm.
you talk a little bit about what went
Well,
into
the idea for the title and the subject matter, how it would be treated, the idea came initially from one of the students, one of the graduates from St. John's, when he was only about 20 years old, and that was Ted Spear. When he was at the University of Manitoba, which was all about 5 minutes from where I lived in Winnipeg, I popped over to his place and did an interview with him and asked about, da da da. What's going on there? What's happening at St. John's anyways? And he said, well, who are you going to talk to? I told him, blah, blah. I'll talk to the teachers. I've talked to a couple of the students already. He said, you know what? Wait until they got older. Wait until you got guys who are parents, a 30, 35-year-old alumnus or something like that. Then he'll have the maturity and perhaps be articulate enough, have a good enough memory that he can say, Stephen, here's what happened. One, two, three. So talk to the old boys. And I already knew, of course, as he did, the National Film Board had come out with a documentary years before about the new boys. That is, going on the trips for the first time and everything. These are the new boys, getting their hair cut, right? Uh,
yep.
Getting lectured about religion and all, and building character and how to be polite to girls, open the door and all this kind of
I
stuff,
don't think that's covered in there. I'm sorry. That
That was well, that's what a lot of them were learning anyways, that kind of stuff. And they were the new boys. And I decided hey, I'm going to take Ted Spear's idea, let a few years go by, and then I'm going to start interviewing the old boys, and that's what we're going to call it, the old boys.
I mean, sorry to bring up Richard again. Well, I'm not sorry, Richard D. Candole's book, but in there,
Hmm.
I had a friend of mine who read it told me it was weird that very few of the boys of Richard's classes back in the 60s actually wanted their kids to go there. In fact, universally, when Richard talked to the class of 1968, 20 years later, none of them could see their children going. Like everyone survived it, but they none of them would subject their kids to it.
Yeah. And you know who told me that too, among others?
Everybody.
Yeah. Old boy Peter Jackson. headmaster
So
headmaster for years of the Alberta school. When I interviewed him, and it's right there on tape. Sorry, it's right there on an interview that he did, not with me. Um, that he wouldn't, not necessarily that was the cautious word he used. Would you do that? Would you have your own son go there? That's an interesting question. Well, not necessarily.
all right, full disclosure, Peter Jackson is, and at least, and I'll talk to it, he's a legend in my mind. He may not be in yours, but for me, he was my high school English teacher, right? And you know how, though, he probably had a lot of influence on me personally on writing. I always found Peter to be fair. He was very driven. I mean, he was the leader of my Grand Portage crew,
hmm
where we set the record from
hmm
Thunder Bay to Selkirk
hmm
uh, through absolute insane 20-hour paddling days and just
hmm
really, really, really going above and beyond, taking risks, whatever. But Jackson pulled it off.
hmm
And but not everybody was Peter Jackson.
Well, the thing is, too, I mean, I can't, and nobody in fairness can take these guys and paint each one of them in black and white. I mean,
Exactly.
that's not fair, and it's not accurate. And I can't say it's not accurate in a few cases. There are a few cases where, yeah, these guys were bastards. You know,
Yes. Yes. The
that's
preponderance, I think I speak for, as an old boy, I speak for most of the
mm,
people the majority of the teacher masters were okay, right? They
mm,
were looking out for the students. I
mm,
think it took a weird turn later, I don't know that I want to get down that rat hole,
Mm,
but you started drawing people who didn't really give a shit about the students. Or if they
mm.
did give a shit, it was for all the wrong reasons.
Well, when
And
you stand back and look at it, Pierre, to be fair though, hopes and expectations of parents. I mean, that they send their kids to school, but if they're doing any thinking at all, they want the best that they can get for their kids. Why wouldn't a school, why wouldn't a school and its staff do the best they could professionally, institutionally, for the ones to which they had a duty of care? Why wouldn't they do their best? If somebody comes along and says, uh, the boy's not doing well in such and such a subject, um, that's a reasonable thing, you know. He's been at your school at St. John's for X months and he's just not doing it, you know. There's a an answer to that, you know. Well, and this was the answer a good few times, certainly according to the students I spoke with. He's not applying himself. It's his fault. That's the intimation. It's his fault. Why? Because that teacher, one of the few perhaps, I don't know, I didn't do a survey on them. That teacher wasn't competent, perhaps in that particular subject. I mean, take a look at Steve Weatherby. Steve Weatherby went to, and this is a quite a lengthy interview I had with Steve, former student, comes from he's in Vancouver Island now, but he
he
went to the Alberta.
also, for the record, he led My New Boy, the one that
Ah,
was,
well there you are. Well, you know Steve,
I know
right?
Steve very well.
Yeah. So here's a guy who said when he after he finished school, and he went there, as you know, to teach as well for a period in the Alberta school. And he said, yeah, they just plumped us up in there and just kind of said, he said, I don't have any experience in teaching. I got none of that. And then they threw us into the the press. You weren't a part of that
I
era.
almost was,
Well, they
but
set up a printing press to publish an Alberta report or flyers or whatever the heck they were doing. And I said, I never done that. I didn't know how to do that. He said, I didn't know carpentry. He said he asked me to go and fix a fence. What do I know about that? I knew nothing about that. So I learned. I had to learn. But it was the same thing with the teaching. There were people who went there who hadn't, and Neil Thompson was an example. Neil, who took part in, of course, as you know, the Lake Temiskaming expedition, and was part of that terrible disaster that happened. He didn't know how to paddle a canoe. He'd never taught anything in his life. On two
well,
levels, then, this guy didn't know what he was doing. Well, why hire him?
because he was English.
Ah, there, your
I'm
prejudices are showing
sorry. I'm
again. Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
You know
yeah.
my point on this
No,
one.
it
They
was
would have
the
been better,
prejudice that existed there, existed in the mind of Frank Weens. He was the guy that hired him.
in my thought, they would have been better off getting surf bums from Southern California, where I came from. At least they know how to swim. No, or had an appreciation of water. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
everybody like, you know, what I don't want to get into Temiskaming because we'll be here forever, but the fact that they didn't know who, nobody asked me if I swam, right? They figured, oh, you got this life jacket on, you'll be fine. You don't need to
Hmm.
swim.
I
And you and
guess.
I know, Stephen, that swimming is very hard. It's one of the best exercises because it takes every piece of your body to get through that water.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
to me, that's what got me. Also with Mr. Thompson, um, the incident where he ate mushrooms and cooked them out in the bush. I
Hmm.
mean, it's my God, if there's ever Darwin at work,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's, I mean, who does that?
Hmm.
I mean,
Well, who's supposed to be responsible for his safety out there if he's an absolute new guy, which he was,
which he was.
relatively new, Somebody's got to take him under their wing. A guy
He'd
like
never
Richard
been in the
Byrd, though,
bush.
Richard Byrd testified at the inquest at Lake T, because we're not going to mention Lake T, at the inquest of that into that disaster. He was asked directly at the inquest, a matter of record, um, do you know which of the boys could swim? No.
Yeah.
You didn't know. You got 27 boys under you because you're this titular expedition leader, and you don't know
Yes.
which ones could swim or how well and which ones couldn't. You didn't know any of that. No,
But they
no.
never bothered. That wasn't just, I wouldn't just lay that on Bird. I mean, they on all
He
the
was the
trips,
leader, for God's sake, Pierre.
Stephen, you could have asked the same question of the leader on any of the trips, and they would have
Yeah,
known. They
but
would have
nobody,
known.
but nobody drowned on those trips.
Details.
Ooh, don't say that.
Details.
You're going to get
They came
crucified by
close.
all kinds of people for using
They
that
came close
expression.
though. They came, but I'm just telling you, they didn't bother, we didn't go to when I was attending, they didn't take us to a pool
Hmm.
for swimming lessons. And I
You know,
guarantee you some of my people were, some of the folks didn't know how to swim.
hmm. Let's take a little backward glance. Do we have time to
Sure.
do that? A little backward glance, okay? Let's take a look at the canoeing handbook that was researched and written, mostly, I understand, by Mike Maunder, a former headmaster of the Ontario School, had a lot to do with the whole history of St. John's, right from the word go to the very last days. Here's a guy that sat down with a lot of research behind him and some advice from guys who knew the stuff and wrote himself a thick handbook like that about the canoeing expeditions, the outdoors expeditions, right? I don't know. The first one didn't deal with the snowshoeing, but it did with the lakes and the rivers and all. All you have to do is go through there from one point to another of the changes that were made as a result of prior experience, including the disaster. And you can pick and choose. You can cherry pick the stuff. Pick out one of those things. Well, is it important to know how? Yes, it's important to know how well the boys swim. You should know how each of your boys in your canoe, how what good swimmers they are. Da 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 da. Right? Do they know how to be a bowsman or a steersman? Right? Do they know how to? Do they know that function? Bosman must have X years experience. Da 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 da. You know where that came from? That came from the bad crap that they had put up with year after year after year after year. That was in the outdoors community at large in Canada. There were school expeditions that were well prepared. They knew what they were doing. But you know what? St. John's couldn't be bothered to look. Because why?
Well,
Because they felt they knew best. Well, they didn't.
that's true. There was an overwhelming feeling that the lore or the experience will get us through.
That it
Between
qualified
God,
them. It
between,
qualified them, they figured. Our
yes,
experience qualifies us as knowing better than anyone. Yeah.
and anyway, but that's you get into this groupthink mentality, and it's easy to see. I mean, you're doing some hardcore stuff out there, be it snowshoeing or canoeing. Nobody was doing what we were doing, I don't think. I mean, I don't think kids were going on 50-mile snowshoe races.
Mm.
Just that, forget the whole society of the school, just that alone. Some of us had big issues surviving through those trips. Some of
Yeah.
us, a lot of people left once snowshoeing started in January. Many, people just ran away, took off. I mean, it was too much.
Didn't come back from Christmas holidays.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, so back to the schools themselves. So there were, I like the way you saw Ontario as a parent participation school.
Hmm.
I think that's really, the parents in Ontario had more to say about stuff than they did in Winnipeg, for
Hmm.
sure, in Selkirk.
Hmm. Hmm.
Selkirk was, I don't want to say it was a fiefdom. That's not the right way to put it. But, Frank controlled Selkirk. Frank Weens, basically controlled whatever happened there as best he
Hmm.
could.
Yeah.
And he ruled, I mean, this is not a negative on Frank, but he ruled because, yeah, he ruled with an iron hand. Um, you didn't mess with Frank at all, right? If you had to go see the headmaster, he was reputed to swat the meanest swats. be less bullshit than anybody. I mean, it was your ultimate, judge, jury, and executioner all in one package. So a tremendous personal thing. When Alberta happened, it was sort of a mix, really. They took a couple guys, a few people from Manitoba, and really moved them over, which the aforementioned Peter Jackson and I believe Keith McKay,
Yeah,
and there were a lot more people than that, those two guys, but
yeah, yeah.
you know, they did an admirable job in Alberta, but a lot of the old boys think it was to Manitoba's detriment.
Well, yeah. One of their very first headmaster or principal, whatever they were calling him at the time, was um, Thompson, who not Neil Thompson, but
David, David Thompson.
Dave. Yeah, he was the forerunner. He was in the vanguard. He was to set up the whole procedures at the Alberta school. And he went in and gathered around him a few people and parental supporters too, who had a very strong influence in the initial years in the Alberta school. And they discussed, should we do this the way we did it in Manitoba? And the question naturally arises, as it says in the minutes and everything, directly or indirectly, is, well, why don't we take what we've learned from Manitoba and do it better? We will do it differently. The Alberta school we'll do it differently. A lot of the stuff will keep the same. We're going to have the snowshoes, absolutely. We're going to have the paddling. We're going to do this and this. But we're going to do things differently here. We're going to involve more of this and that and the other thing. And you know what? Dave Thompson got canned. He got fired after the what, third year? They got rid of him.
You know,
Ted
and
Byfield, Ted Byfield couldn't stand the guy.
yeah, and this is after Mr. Thompson like almost gives his leg up to gangrene on a canoe
Yep,
trip
yep.
earlier on,
Hmm.
slips on margarine in the back of a bus and breaks his back, I think, right?
Hmm.
I
Yep.
mean, and in those days, I mean, he literally was in a half body cast.
Hmm.
There's a scene in there with him, in a bus in a full, almost a full cast, getting around Alberta, getting around Edmonton.
Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, they no,
Yeah.
you couldn't have a more loyal, what the hell do
Yeah.
you have to do?
Yeah. No, he was devoted. David
Totally.
Thompson was devoted. Yeah.
But he wasn't Byfield.
No, he wasn't. Byfield, he couldn't stand the sight of him.
Yeah,
Simply
and for
put,
whatever
yeah,
reason,
yeah. Well, Ted told me this, the guy wasn't doing it right. The parents didn't like him. The parents didn't like him? Huh?
like that ever stopped you from
Yeah.
doing anything?
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't
Well,
know.
anyway, my friend, I think we this has gone on pretty long. I think we should bring it to a termination at least so we can get this published and up there.
Okay, doke.
But one last thing, be sure to buy God's Paddlers
Oh,
available at
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
all your
yeah.
fine Amazon shopping stores.
Hmm.
One point I wanted to make to our Canadian friends, and this is Pierre in solidarity with you, the price in Canada is the same dollar amount, or at least it's $30 in Canada, $30 in the US.
Hmm.
So we make sure that our Canadian friends have the same economic advantages. At least I do.
Hmm.
Stephen doesn't feel that way, but I do. I just want
Hmm.
all our Canada people to know. Anyway, thank you very much, and say goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye and get out there and buy the book. You know,
Thank
get
you
it
very
on,
much.
get it online. Bye.
Bye.